Ancient structures found in Venezuela help explain why the Trump administration was so intent on removing Nicolas Maduro. Elon Musk increased his estimate of the number of starships that will be built per year from 1,000 to 10,000. What's driving his confidence? Trump seeks 50% hike in defense budget to $1.5 trillion. Why? David Grusch outs Lieutenant General James Clapper as the senior U.S. Air Force official running the UFO crash retrieval program. Grusch also confirms decades-long claims that former Vice President Dick Cheney played a key leadership role in running classified UFO programs. Alleged first-hand witness account of what recently happened with the capture of Nicolas Maduro is consistent with super soldier claims about advanced weapons used in secret space programs. These stories and more on Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Welcome to the January 10 edition of Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review. We're a little late for this Week in Review because I was we were traveling in northern Florida to find a new home. And so we have found something, and we will be moving into the area around Daytona Beach. So more on that later in February once we move in. And I also am still getting over a cough, so please excuse me if there is some coughing in here, but thankfully I'm passing through it, or it's passing through me, taking lots of zinc, vitamin B12, and all those goodies to get rid of whatever nasty bug is trying to establish its foothold in me. And I know many others have had a similar problem. So let's begin with the first story for this Week in Review. And this is an extract from a interview that JP did on Exopolitics Today, which helps explain why the Trump administration was so intent on removing Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, he was sharing his resources and discoveries with the Chinese. And apparently the US removed Maduro because they wanted a more compliant regime there who would share what it was that was recently discovered, not with the Chinese, but with, of course, Uncle Sam. All right, so let's play this video clip of JP explaining what it was that was recently found in Venezuela. Now, it's interesting that you mentioned Venezuela, that they discovered some structures or some ancient technologies in Venezuela, because that would explain why the US is so interested now in, let's just say, getting into Venezuela.
The south part of Venezuela, they found these structures inside their type of rainforest. And these structures, they look like pyramids, but they're really deep. They're really deep, similar to the structures they found under the Egyptian pyramids. They found major structures under the Venezuela, South Venezuela, and they're trying to keep that from the public. But I don't think that's going to be kept soon when they find out. Or either the Venezuelans, they're going to let that information out, or the United States will let that information out. And apparently it has a lot of gold or something like that. A lot of different metals there in Venezuela.
Well, I think what JP just shared here gives us a compelling reason for why it was that the US intervened in Venezuela by removing its dictator, or its leader, Nicolas Maduro. And it had nothing to do really with drugs. And I don't even think it has all that much to do with oil, which is what a lot of geopolitical analysts insist. In fact, it's because these ancient structures were found, these ancient pyramids were found in Venezuela, in these remote jungle areas in the south. And the Trump administration, or let's just say the white hats, the people running covert programs, were saying, well, look, Maduro's sharing a lot of things with the Chinese. He's got to go. And what we want is a more compliant leader in Venezuela that will let us go in and take or investigate and do what's necessary with kind of utilizing or exploiting whatever ancient technologies or structures are found in Venezuela. And to me, this is a very compelling exopolitical reason for the intervention in Venezuela. It was because the regime leader Maduro was giving the Chinese open access to a lot of things. The Chinese were more than ready to go in and investigate these ancient discoveries. And I think the oil and drug explanations are just kind of like theater, really. They're just the side explanation. But this is the real justification, in my mind. Here is something that I thought was very significant, and this comes from a website, Astronomy Vibes. Just when scientists thought they had a handle on 3i Atlas, it did something unexpected. The interstellar visitor isn't just racing through our solar system, it's emitting strange, steady radio signals that have set off alarms across the global scientific community. These aren't random bursts or background noise. They're real, detectable, and persistent enough to force emergency-level observation campaigns. So there you have an independent source saying that 3i Atlas is transmitting radio signals. Now, this to me is impressive corroboration for the claim. Well, there's been several claims regarding 3i Atlas and radio signals. The first one came from Dr. R.V. Loeb, who said that 3i Atlas was emerging from the same direction in the night sky, which is the Sagittarius constellation, from which the famous 1977 WOW signal was detected. And the implication being that the WOW signal was actually transmitted from 3i Atlas nearly 50 years ago. Now we have Stewart Swerdlow, and he was told by a high-level NASA official that 3i Atlas is transmitting radio signals to the Earth, and that SpaceX's Starship is being used to block the radio signals, that the Pentagon wants to prevent astronomers, whoever has the capability of detecting radio signals coming from outer space, detecting signals coming from 3i Atlas. So I thought that this was very important corroboration with what Stewart Swerdlow had said in an interview and also in a webinar we did together. Now, here is a significant piece of information concerning Elon Musk's plans to build gigafactories that would build up to 1,000 starships a year. He wants to build one in Texas and one in Florida. I think he wants to call them Gigabay or Gigabays. So, but he wants to increase the number of starships produced from 1,000 to 10,000. So what's driving his confidence here? Why is he predicting such high-level demand for starships in the near future? Now, I think there's a number of possibilities that we can go through here, because Elon Musk clearly is someone that is playing a very influential role in space affairs at the moment. And you just had the appointment of a close friend of his, Jared Isaacman, as the NASA administrator, and SpaceX is going to play a big role in the Artemis program. And also you have the Artemis Accords with 60 nations that are going to be collaborating with the United States. So there are 60 nations with burgeoning space programs. Each one has companies in those countries, for example, French companies, German companies, British, Australian companies, and so forth, that are looking to space as being the next big frontier. And it's like, well, if you want to make a lot of money and you're a corporation, well, the big money that's coming is in mining platinum in the asteroid belt, or going to the moon and mining helium-3, or maybe it's space tourism, or maybe it's having deep space satellites observing the skies for intelligence surveillance purposes. Maybe it's conducting experiments in the Earth, so in orbit, so that you can actually develop new types of medicines or drugs or whatever it is that a corporation is interested in doing. And so they're understanding that the Starship is the cheapest rocket that can get you into space and back again, because Musk has really mastered the reusability of Starships. And I don't know of any other company yet. I think Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin is maybe experimenting with reusable rockets. But at the moment, I think it's just SpaceX. And clearly, if he wants to increase production, or plans to increase production from 1,000 a year, which already is incredibly high, to 10,000, he must be confident that the technology used in these reusable rockets is going to be needed for at least another decade. Why else would you build so many of them? So what's driving his confidence? One possibility, reusability, driving down costs for corporations to invest in space. I just went over that. New propulsion systems coming online. So maybe Musk understands that there are new propulsion systems, and that that is going to drive demand for Starship, which can take a lot of tonnage into space as it is. But if you have new propulsion systems, then it can take a lot more into space. And I don't remember the number of people you could place on a Starship, but definitely you have the capability even now for placing. I know it's more than a dozen, as compared to, say, these small capsules that were part of the Apollo program, the Saturn V program, and so forth. Cold fusion energy about to transform space travel. So we're hearing a lot more about nuclear fusion, that there are different companies coming online. Donald Trump's media conglomerate, Trump Media, I believe it is, that owns Truth Social. Devin Nunes, the chairman of that, the CEO, has announced, and I discussed this in last week's update, that they have invested in a fusion company. So I suspect that some kind of nuclear fusion propulsion system is eventually going to come on board, or at least be declassified, because I do believe that a lot of the technologies that we see about to be released aren't new at all. I mean, like, for example, you look at, say, nuclear fusion. Well, the US Navy has been using nuclear fusion for decades in its spacecraft carriers, but it's only more recently that it has started to declassify some of that, and we saw that through these patent applications that Dr. Salvador Payez released close to 10 years ago now. That's how long ago. So nuclear fusion is definitely on the way. And another explanation is that non-human intelligence, extraterrestrials, Galactic Federation, the Confederation of Planets, the Alliance of Worlds, whatever your favorite terminology is for these different organizations out there, the Ashtar Command, that they have ended a planetary quarantine, that our planet has been in quarantine because we're too warlike and we're not cooperating with one another. And so apparently there's been enough progress, sufficient movement towards international cooperation, that the extraterrestrials have said, okay, you no longer need to be quarantined as a planet. We are going to allow you to really go anywhere you want in your solar system. So the solar system is yours to explore. Yeah, keep away from Europa, though. That's if Arthur C. Clarke is right. Well, so I think that's what the extraterrestrials may have said to the White Hats, to those running the covert programs. And so this, I think, is maybe filtering down to people like Elon Musk, and they're getting the word that, okay, now humanity is going to go interplanetary. We have the reusable rockets to make that happen, and down the pipeline, we're going to get more advanced propulsion systems and so forth. And I talked about this. It'll merge that there'll be a two-tier system where one will be all these reusable rockets that are used by members of the Artemis Accords. Different nations will participate. Smaller nations will have these starships to be able to, for their corporations to take them deep into space for tourism, mining, exploration, and so forth. But in the meantime, you have the classified military programs, and that's where all the really good stuff, the exotic stuff, will be kept secret for some time to come. I don't know when we can expect to hear about, say, zero-point energy, torsion field, the propulsion systems, anti-gravity propulsion systems. It seems that those more exotic energy and propulsion systems are inherently, well, not just more challenging, but also more dangerous. And I think that's why they're not going to be releasing those anytime soon, because, I mean, you take, say, for example, torsion field physics. I mean, not only do you have a means of propulsion there, you have a means of time travel. And so you don't want corporations and common folks having access to time travel technologies, because that could be disastrous. Okay, so here's a tweet by Jay Anderson, the founder of the Unity Project, and he says that he overheard a conversation between a friend of his and Brad Sorenson concerning the testimony of Mark McCandlish, a patent illustrator. So let me play the relevant section for you. I'll just play a portion of this so you get to hear what Jay Anderson has to say about what he says he overheard being said between a friend of his and Brad Sorenson, the patent illustrator, who shared what he experienced in 1988 when he went into a classified air show where he saw 3 flying saucers. And he shared that with his close friend, Mark McCandlish, who then did an illustration of it, of the 3 craft, and showed it to Sorenson, and Sorenson said yes. And then Mark McCandlish, a decade later, became part of the Disclosure Project, where he revealed this. But we haven't heard from Brad Sorenson that Mark McCandlish was sharing secondhand testimony. Brad Sorenson is the source, and apparently Jay Anderson says he overheard Brad Sorenson confirming what it was that Mark McCandlish had to say about these 3 flying saucers on display at an air show that was being conducted simultaneously at Norton Air Force Base and also Edwards Air Force Base.
Mark McCandlish, military illustrator, he had a friend called Brad Sorenson. Now, Brad Sorenson was a government guy, aerospace engineer. Lockheed Martin had quite an extensive portfolio. And Brad Sorenson goes to his buddy one day, Mark McCandlish, and he says, I was shown something, and I want you to draw it. I'm going to describe it to you in great detail, and I want you to create the illustration. Brad Sorenson says that, I think it was in like the 70s or like late 60s or early 70s, that he was invited to a private air show at Lockheed Martin by an individual who was a good friend of his in the military, who was higher up than him. And apparently this, he didn't have what they call the tickets, the right classifications to actually get access to this private air show, but his friend brought him because he had the tickets. And essentially they bring him into a hangar in Lockheed Martin where 3 large saucers of varying size were hovering a few feet off of the ground. They were described as instantaneous nuclear payload delivery systems. That's the way that they were actually classifying them. Had a nickname for them. Instantaneous nuclear payload delivery systems. Like the idea that you could just instantaneously deliver a nuclear payload to anywhere in the world.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Which is, again, one of the reasons why they might keep this stuff secret. The ships were nicknamed Mama Bear, Baby Bear, and Papa Bear.
Oh my God.
Yeah. What's really interesting about this is that Brad Sorenson has never gone public.
All right, well, I want to stop it there because that's the key. Brad Sorenson, the person who saw these 3 flying saucers at a classified air show, and he mentions Lockheed Martin being the company that actually was responsible for building these craft. Brad Sorenson has never come forward. He just shared it with Mark McCandlish, and Mark McCandlish did come forward and share that. And so here you have someone, Jay Anderson, saying that he overheard Brad Sorenson confirming what Mark McCandlish had to say. And so that's very important because there is this belief out there that is circulating from those that are very interested in crashed UFO retrieval programs and the evidence that these are being studied by corporations in attempt to reverse engineer them, that those reverse engineering attempts have failed. And this is something that came through in the Age of Disclosure documentary, that again and again, of those 34 witnesses, many said, yeah, UFOs are real, and yes, there have been recoveries, and yes, non-human intelligence exists and are associated with them. And yes, corporations are studying these to reverse engineer them, but no, they haven't been successfully reverse engineered. So what we're seeing up there is not ours. It belongs either to a peer adversary, Russia, China, or the extraterrestrials, or the interdimensionals. Okay, or Santa Claus, if you want to, if you want to use NASA terminology for covering up the UFO phenomenon. But this has been the position that a lot of people have taken, and this is the big beef that Dr. Stephen Greer has with the Age of Disclosure documentary, that it ignores testimony like Mark McCandlish and Brad Sorenson, that yes, these craft have been successfully reverse engineered. In fact, in 1988, you had 3 of these craft being shown on at an air show for customers. So people were putting in orders. Who were putting in orders for these 3 classified flying saucer shaped craft in 1988? Well, customers would be like the US Air Force Space Command at the time, the National Reconnaissance Office, the CIA, the US Navy. They would be some of the customers. You also might have international customers like Australia or Britain's military putting in orders for these craft, and so this has been going on since at least the 1980s, that these craft have been successfully reverse engineered and are being used by different customers. Here is a interview I did with another German galactic envoy. And this is, I think, a pattern that I'm kind of seeing and others are experiencing, that there are a lot of people, typically females, who realize after a lifetime of abuse, trauma, abductions by government entities in my labs, or extraterrestrials such as the grey extraterrestrials, they go through a journey which is very traumatic, but then they at some point realize that they actually have these star families watching over them, and that they are part of a galactic envoy program where they have volunteered to come to Earth, experience life here, and provide intelligence to the Galactic Federation of Worlds or any extraterrestrial organization to which they are members, and that they have partners or husbands in those galactic organizations who are watching over them. So Steffi Ora is one of these people, or one of these ladies who went through a tremendous amount of trauma. And this is a pattern I've discovered in the interviews I've been doing with a lot of these ladies who claim to be galactic envoys, that the pattern is typically that at a very early age they're identified, they are known to be starseeds, and they are subjected to trauma either from MyLabs or grey extraterrestrial abductions, and very gruesome trauma is experienced by them, but they get through it, and then eventually they get to learn about them being part of the Galactic Envoy program. So even though you got to hear just how gruesome some of the things they experienced are, we're talking things like Kathy O'Brien, Transformation of America, which was one of the most difficult books I've ever read, describing what happened to her. A lot of these ladies have had similar things happen to them. So it's very traumatic, but yet they've been able to get through. All right, now here is something concerning Elon Musk declaring 2026 the year of singularity. So, and he's talking about the accelerating pace of the emergence of artificial intelligence, and so he's responding to these rapid advances. So let's listen to what Elon Musk has to say about artificial intelligence and its emergence and us reaching this singularity point.
They call it the singularity for a reason, because we don't know what's going to happen. In the not that far future, the percentage of intelligence that is human will be quite small. At some point, the collective sum of human intelligence will be less than 1% of all intelligence. And if things get to a Carter level, we're talking about human intelligence, like massive intelligence augmentation, where like everyone has an IQ of 1,000. Even in that circumstance, collective human intelligence will be probably 1/billionth that of digital intelligence.
Okay, so I mean, that's kind of a very depressing prognosis there by Elon Musk, that even if humanity were to increase our intelligence quotient to 1,000, right, still we would be eclipsed by machines, by AI, kind of similar to what you have in modern chess, for example, where the grandmasters, Magnus Carlsen, for example, the world champion, or Gukesh, the world kind of long-form chess champion, if they play computers, then the computer will beat them very easily now. That's how advanced computer intelligence has become. And the year of singularity typically denotes the year where you actually have artificial general intelligence emerging, where computers can now do just about everything that humans can. And we're seeing that. Now, this is where I have to separate from Elon Musk and say that, he is a tech guy. I mean, and he's brilliant. There's no doubt about it. He's a brilliant tech guy. But he misses something very important here, that, yeah, sure, if you measure intelligence in terms of problem solving, then AI, computers, they will eclipse humans, or even have, as he's pointed out. And I have no dispute with what he says there. But intelligence is more than just problem solving. There's also emotional intelligence. That is things like being able to know what is happening around you, how people are feeling, being able to empathize with them, being able to predict their behavior because you're reading their emotions, you know how you feel. So there's emotional intelligence. There's also psychic intelligence, and that can be measured as well. People who have high degrees of psychic intelligence, they can do things like telekinesis, telepathy, clairaudience, clairvoyance. They can project themselves. They can bilocate. I mean, these are all aspects of psychic intelligence. And there are some shows, I mean, of course, Star Wars, the Jedi Knights, I mean, there's an example of psychic intelligence. And then there's source intelligence, and that is where humans are able to connect with the macro. And we're talking about source intelligence, so that can either be micro, macro. I mean, the macro, the galactic core, or even beyond that, or you're talking about infinitesimal space, like location within the heart center. I mean, these are things that humans can do much better than artificial intelligence or robots. And so I think this is one of the things that is going to, for the decades ahead, as AI takes over a lot of the running of, say, the basic aspects of human life, society, and so forth, because they're brilliant in terms of problem solving. But when it comes to emotional intelligence, psychic intelligence, source intelligence, the machines just, they don't live up to it. They can't get close. And that's where humans will excel. And I think that's going to be the saving grace for humanity as we do enter into this singularity point. All right, here is something that was tweeted or exposted by Mike Herrera. He's one of the whistleblowers that encountered a flying triangle craft while he was serving with the US Marines during an incident in Indonesia after the big earthquake and flood there in the early 2000s. Okay, so this is what he says. I'm just going to put this out there. If zero-point energy technologies weren't being concealed, then we wouldn't have to worry about $17 trillion of oil from Venezuela or anywhere else. But the caveat is that it would take a little bit of time to suit the infrastructure with zero-point energy. Okay, so what's he saying here? Well, zero-point energy is something that many scientists have been talking about, going all the way back to Nikola Tesla, and you can extract incredible amounts of energy from the quantum vacuum. There's enough energy in a cubic centimeter of space, of empty space, to power the sun for a century, for example. Now, I mean, I think that ability to harness zero-point energy would indeed transform the world, but I think the reason it's being withheld from us, from most of society, is because that much power could be weaponized. And that's the danger here, which is why I think that they are going to just allow us to proceed down this path of kind of maybe using nuclear fusion, solar power from the sun, using space mirrors and so forth, that these will be deemed safer forms of energy as humanity becomes an interplanetary society. But zero-point energy, because of this enormous energy that can be harnessed there, that could be used for making bombs. I mean, bombs that would make the hydrogen bomb look like a firecracker, that you don't want that kind of technology out there. So I think this is probably why they're holding back on zero-point energy, torsion field physics, its application for propulsion systems and so forth, which are being used in secret space programs, but I don't think they're going to be released to the general public anytime soon. Okay, so here is something that I thought was very interesting. This comes from Carb, who is the son of Judith Lynn, who claims to be in communication with the Galactic Federation and different Pleiadians. And there's a lot of controversy about Carb, and that is something I'm not going to dive into here, because I think on the other hand, he does share some really interesting and relevant information that is worth considering here. And so he says that he was told back in 2019 that Trump would acquire Greenland. The public reason Trump gives is valid. Putin and Xi aren't who they appear to be, and Trump knows it. This is why Trump wants a new missile defense system, why he's eliminating China's puppet proxies in the West. And I totally agree with that. I think that is what we saw in Venezuela. Leaders of Latin America who work closely with China, let the Chinese in, they're going to be removed. They're going to just, like Maduro, just taken out. And there's not going to be any kind of compromise with that. And the only game in town will be if there's any kind of national security aspect to any kind of new technologies or discoveries, then the US is going to be the one that dominates that, and it's not going to be China in the Western Hemisphere. The hidden reason to have Greenland is because there are bases there where humans are meeting with the Galactic Federation, and I think that's very, very plausible. The acquisition of Greenland means that Pleiadians are allowing for contact to increase before the shift with the military and possibly others. So let's listen to this clip here of Trump talking about Greenland.
I will say this about Greenland. We need Greenland from a national security situation. It's so strategic. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And Denmark is not going to be able to do it, I can tell you.
Okay, so there you have President Trump explaining why Greenland is important to U.S. national security, and that Denmark, despite it being the kind of the country that's in charge of Greenland, that it's not going to really be able to deal with all of the aspects of China's and Russia's programs. Now, one thing I did want to add to this post was that Greenland was also an important location for Nazi Germany's submarine bases and flying saucer programs. So there is a lot of infrastructure in Greenland that the Germans found, ancient infrastructure, tunnels and artifacts that have been there a long, long time. And that's similar to what was found in Antarctica, and the Germans were led there. So Greenland definitely is a place with a lot that's hidden under the ice. And as in the case of Venezuela, the United States is concerned about other countries like China or Russia having access to some of those ancient technologies, infrastructure that's under the Greenland ice cap. So I think that's why the Trump administration really is intent on acquiring Greenland. Okay, so here's something that is very, very significant. It's a story in Space War where it talks about Trump seeks a 50% hike in defense budget to $1.5 trillion. I mean, that's huge news. Why in the world would an already bloated Pentagon bureaucracy that can't audit itself be given a 50% bigger budget? I mean, right now, for years, the Pentagon has failed audit after audit. There's trillions of dollars that can't be accounted for. So you could understand that, well, there's a lot of money coming through the Pentagon and being siphoned off to places, and no one knows where or how much. you could just make estimates based on the overall irregularities in these auditing reports that can be as much as $2.1 trillion that was reported in September 10, 2001. So why would the Pentagon, which now has a budget of close to, I think it's around 900 billion, why would you hike that to 1.5 trillion? Now, this is where we get into the black budget. Now, something that a lot of people don't understand is that there are, in fact, two black budgets. One black budget is the one that most geopolitical analysts are aware of, which is the money that's siphoned through the Pentagon that's then distributed to the intelligence community to fund it. And so they decided to do it that way because they didn't want America's enemies learning about how much money was actually being sent to the CIA, to the National Security Agency, to the NRO, and other members of the intelligence community. And presently, that's around $70 to $80 billion a year, which is a significant amount of money, but only a tenth of the overall Pentagon budget. Well, what's not known is that there's a second black budget, and this is the illicit black budget. This is where the deep state and the CIA raise money off the books. So the first black budget is raised using government appropriations, where the Congress says, okay, yeah, we're gonna approve all these line items, and yeah, sure, we're not going to ask questions about why this toilet seat costs $10,000 or why that solar panel costs $15,000. We know that there's a black budget being funded through this, so we're not going to say anything. So that's the official black budget. But the unofficial, or the second black budget, is the money that the CIA has been accumulating through the drug trade, through pump and dump, Wall Street trading, insider trading, human trafficking, and so forth, that the CIA has been involved in this for decades. And this is something that many credible people have reported, and that the amount of money that is generated annually through this illicit black budget is in the vicinity, or even more than, $1 trillion a year. You can go back to the late 1990s and you have similar estimates that this illicit black budget raises close to $1 trillion. And at that time, the Pentagon budget was only $300 to $400 billion. So it was 3 times the size of the Pentagon budget. And all of that was actually all of that money was going into funding the secret space programs, the deep underground military bases, because you had to fund all of this in a way that Congress would not know, that Congress wouldn't be involved in that kind of level of funding, because Congress would ask questions. So they came up with a means of funding that goes outside of the kind of conventional appropriations system that the US Congress is involved in. So now what's happened is that the deep state, the CIA organizations or groups that are involved in all of this illicit activity, they've been squeezed by the white hats, by the people associated with the Trump administration, that are hunting down and putting an end to all of the human trafficking, the drug trade, the Wall Street trade, insider Wall Street trading, and all of that's being stopped. So that leaves a gap. I mean, that leaves a shortfall. Then, well, if you're in the Pentagon and you have a secret space program, you don't want to use Congress to fund it. Where are you going to get the money now if all of a sudden that siphon from the CIA is closed, because the drug money and the human trafficking is all being stopped by the white hats? Special military forces and operators are going in and putting an end to all of that. Where are you going to get the money? Well, this is where Trump steps in. Trump is asking for that $500 $500 billion a year in increased revenue, because that would offset the money that was previously coming in through the CIA, through the deep state, using all of these illicit activities that, and the White Hats understand this, that, there was, not only were you were funding the DUMBs and you were funding the secret space programs, but what you were really doing overall was you're dumbing down human consciousness, because you're spreading, or you're helping the drug trade, you're helping human trafficking and corruption in Wall Street and all of those things. And because the White Hats want the Earth to join the galactic community, we had to clean up our act. And so this is why Trump is asking for an extra $500 billion, and I think he'll probably get it without too much trouble. And he's justifying it in terms of, well, we're going to get all this extra money through tariffs. Let's fund the Pentagon, and this is necessary. You have to do this because these DUMBs, these secret space programs, do need to be funded. And of course, they're being cleaned out of all their deep state satanic elements. And so that means that the Congress will actually play a role in the future. And I think that's a good thing. Okay, so here we get David Grusch talking about, or revealing, who the senior leaders involved in the running of UFO crash retrieval programs have been. So in this extract from an interview he did with Megyn Kelly, David Grusch opens up on the role that James Clapper played in running the UFO crash retrieval program. That Clapper, as a former Director of National Intelligence and 3-star Air Force general, that he was actually closely involved in running these crash retrieval programs, and he knows a lot more than was being revealed in the Age of Disclosure documentary where he was interviewed. So let's listen to what David Grusch has to say.
General Clapper, the former DNI in the documentary, I certainly applaud him for at least speaking out in general. He goes on, I believe, I've only seen clips of Age of Disclosure, not the whole thing, where there was a program when he was the Director of National Intelligence where they were tracking these vehicles over Area 51, of course, the famed classified test location. And I'm a little bit disappointed, as a fellow Air Force officer, and certainly General Clapper rose to the ranks as 3-star general. That's all he said in the documentary, that was a program he was aware of. In fact, without being inappropriate, I will say that General Clapper was well aware of the crash retrieval issue, managed the crash retrieval issue, and when he was the DNI, USDI, and DIA director, he placed people in critical roles to manage this issue, both publicly and, I'll just say, non-publicly as well. And I'll allow the audience distill what I'm saying at the risk of being inappropriate or going too far with my discussion. So General Clapper, Stephanie O'Sullivan, other folks in the IC that are well aware of this issue, that were in rooms discussing this issue, I ask you to be greater leaders on this. I should not be the only former military officer and intelligence official that is being completely candid with the information that they were exposed to. So perhaps...
And once again, James Clapper understates what he knows and what he's done.
Okay, that was very significant right there, that James Clapper, even though he appeared in this Age of Disclosure documentary, that he knows far more than he was disclosing, that he in fact was managing the UFO crash retrieval program and even appointing people to manage it within the military or within the intelligence community. So to me, what this suggests is that the secrecy system is falling apart, because now you're having senior leaders like James Clapper being called out by Air Force officers like David Grusch, saying that, yeah, Clapper was running the show. And so he knows a lot more than what he's saying. So now the stage has been set for James Clapper to reveal more of what he knows, go on the public record. So that's one prominent leader that David Grusch has outed. There is also another, and this is where David Grusch now talks about the role played by Dick Cheney in UFO crash retrieval programs. So let's listen to David Grusch talking about the former Vice President and Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney.
Found it deeply disgusting and shocking that even I was not fully accessed into these activities, and I did have a congressionally mandated need to know. I investigated this on behalf of the first Trump administration and some of Trump's cabinet members, and Senator Rubio when he was a senator, now Secretary Rubio, and providing my findings up the chain. I was just very disturbed to find how this was controlled, the self-licking ice cream cone, unaccountable. Everybody owns a piece. Nobody owns the outcome, and there's not really a mob boss. The closest person we got that I was aware of was, unfortunately, now deceased Vice President Dick Cheney, Darth Vader himself. Not shocking that he was involved in this. And essentially, when he left in 2009, that was the last time that these activities really had central leadership. I found it deeply disgusting.
Okay, there you have Dick Cheney being outed by David Grusch as being like a mob boss, as being like the guy that was in charge of the legacy UFO program, UFO crash retrievals and so forth. So why is that significant? Well, this is confirmation for earlier whistleblowers that honed in on the role of Dick Cheney in being a prominent leader in running classified UFO programs. Now, there was a whistleblower. His name was Derek Hennessy, Connor O'Ryan, and he described himself as a black SEAL. That is, a Navy SEAL whose military records were scrubbed so that he could then operate at the behest of the deep state of the UFO legacy program. And he says that in 1991, he was stationed at S4 to cool down after an assassination was completed, and that one of his roles was as a black SEAL or as someone that had his records scrubbed and so forth, so no way he could be traced. He would be sent on assassination missions. And one of those missions he described involved a distinguished Green Beret who was threatening UFO secrecy. So there were these hit teams out there that were involved in assassinating UFO researchers or witnesses or anyone threatening the UFO secrecy system. And Dick Cheney ran that assassination program. And he says that in 1991, he was on guard duty at S4 because S4 was a place where they would bring these elite operators who were trained to be assassins. They would take them to S4 to cool down. And so he was at S4 cooling down after an assignment, and he saw Dick Cheney, who came to view the captured UFOs and the dead extraterrestrial biological entities, and that Cheney was playing a very prominent role in running the program. Now, the thing is that Derek Hennessy was interviewed by Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens, who at first sat on his testimony for over a decade because he thought it maybe was disinformation, but others came forward to corroborate what Derek Hennessy had to say. And I was fortunate enough to work with Colonel Stevens for several years in investigating this particular case. And Derek Hennessy, Connor O'Ryan was very, very real, and he identified Dick Cheney. And so here's a link to an article I wrote back in, let's see, this was a two-part series that was originally published in July of 2009 on the examiner.com, but the Examiner went belly up and all the articles were lost. I was one of the authors or journalists, if you like, that were publishing regularly on the Examiner, so all our articles disappeared. But thankfully, many of them I was able to retrieve, and so this is one of the articles I retrieved, and I republished it on my website in 2020. So, but this article dates back to 2009 when I was working with Colonel Stevens on this particular case, and it is very, very real. Right, here is a interview or an update I did with JP, where he's talking about his mission to track Nordic spacecraft, how he went to Eglin Air Force Base and that there were 3 flying triangles there, or kind of small versions of the TR-3B, that he got on one of them, and that they went out to a area out in the ocean, and that their job was to track these Nordic extraterrestrial spacecraft. So very interesting that he talks about that. He also discusses some other aspects of what he's learned about, and in there we talk about the F-47, which I wasn't aware when we did the interview what the F-47 was. Well, now I know that it's an experimental 6th generation fighter being developed by the Boeing company, and that according to JP, the flying triangle he saw was similar in size to the F-47. Well, and so JP was taken to the Gulf of America, out to some mining facility out there where they were tracking these Nordic spacecraft, and he is describing what it was that he was doing and what lies ahead for humanity as 2026 unfolds. So more on that soon. All right, so here is a extended extract of the David Grusch interview with Megyn Kelly, where he discussed the leadership roles of Dick Cheney and James Clapper in classified UFO programs. So as I said, this is very significant because now the leaders of these programs are being outed. Of course, Dick Cheney is dead, but James Clapper is still very much alive. Now he's being outed. And so, you have the means now for the US Congress to simply summon James Clapper in the next congressional hearing. The UFO caucus, Tim Burchett, Anna Paulina Luna, Eric Burleson, and several others. Now they have someone that they could zero in on, James Clapper. Well, we know, according to David Grusch, that you ran the crash retrieval program. What's going on? Tell us about it. So he'll be on the congressional record, or they can interview him in a classified facility and learn more about it. So very exciting that the leaders, the people actually involved in running the programs, are starting to be outed, and that's certainly to David Grusch's record or credit that he's doing that. All right, here is a very interesting post from someone who says that there were some advanced technologies that were used by the Delta Force operators that that abducted or captured Nicolas Maduro. So let's listen to what a witness said about this. And this was all originally recorded in Spanish, and this is all being kind of summarized by this particular individual who gives a link to the original Spanish source, which is important.
A security guard that was protecting Maduro has spoken, and you got to hear what he said. It's in Spanish, but I'll translate. Also, Trump announced that, the cartels, they're going after him in Mexico. The whole vibe of Latin America has changed because of what happened in Venezuela. And now that we're getting firsthand accounts from people that were there. The soldier says they didn't hear him coming. He says the Americans had technology superior to anything they've ever seen. Everything that they were using for radar, for anything, was completely taken offline. They had drones, and the drones were taking out bases and taking out things faster. They didn't have no technology. They've never had to fight against drones. He also talks about that there was only 8 helicopters. There was only 20 men that were sent in, and those 20 men killed hundreds of their men, and none of those soldiers were injured. He talks about it felt like they were firing 300 rounds a minute. Nothing they've ever seen, nothing that they can compete with. And then he also talks to the fact that the Americans had some kind of sonic shock boom that was sent out, and everybody immediately started bleeding profusely out of their nose. They couldn't even gather themselves because whatever was sent at them made them fall to their knees and vomit blood out of their mouth and out of their noses. They were incapacitated immediately. He says he never wants to go through that again. Doesn't want to have to fight with the Americans again. He's sending warnings to everybody out there that you think you can fight the Americans. You don't even know what their weaponry is like and what they're capable of. 20 men took out hundreds, and that's starting to spread all through Latin America. And now they're not saying, if you want me, come and get me anymore. They're like, oh shit. Especially after Trump says, hey, Mexico, you're on the list too.
So there you have, I think, an explanation for the success of this capture of Nicolas Maduro, that the US special operators, the Delta forces, were using advanced technology, state-of-the-art technology, well, far ahead of what conventional militaries are using and far ahead of what is available in the open source world. The arms dealers and manufacturers, they don't have this kind of technology. Even states don't have this kind of technology. And the warning sign that was sent here clearly was that, well, if you, as a leader of a South American country or Latin American country, if you defy the will of the Trump administration, we have the means of being able to send in these special forces operators, and they can slice through any kind of opposition you set up there, and we'll take you. And so, and again, that kind of brings back the exopolitical dimension to this, which is that what the Trump administration is doing is saying, look, everything in the Americas stays in the Americas. You're not going to give it to China. You're not going to give it to Russia. If you find something of interest to us, you're going to give it to us, or we will remove your leader, whoever's the obstacle, and replace them with someone else. And so that's what we're seeing in Venezuela. They didn't replace the regime. They just removed the leader, who was obstinate, and now they have the former vice president, who's now the president, who's more compliant, and I'm sure behind the scenes she's saying, yeah, whatever you want. You want to take all these treasures under our jungles and all of that. Yeah, go for it. We don't know how to deal with that kind of stuff. That's your domain, and of course the oil. They're going to use that to kind of like put pressure on China and Cuba and so forth. So yeah, there are these advanced technologies, and interestingly, JP or Jorge Pabon, he lived near MacDill Air Force Base at the time when we were releasing some of the photos of the flying triangles and flying rectangles that he was seeing or photographing or videotaping, and was encouraged to do so. So they're available on my website, and he was saying that, JP was saying at the time, that they were using MacDill Air Force Base to launch these special operations using these classified technologies all over the world. And MacDill is the home of Special Operations Command, and so the Delta Force operators, they either operated directly out of MacDill or some other facility, but Special Operations Command would have been the key player in running the whole program. That Special Forces or that Special Operators going into Venezuela. All right, well, that completes the stories for this week in review. Now, what I want to do is just announce that we are going to be doing another webinar panel that is going to be held on January 31st. I'm going to have JP participate in that, Jorge Pabon, along with Gene Deco, both of whom have served in the US military. JP served with the US Army. Gene served with the US Navy for over 20 years, and both have a ton of information about events that are happening behind the scenes. And so we're going to be talking about power shifts, artificial intelligence, and extraterrestrials in 2026. I'll be doing a presentation followed by a panel discussion with JP and Gene Decode, where we dive deep into all of the information that they've been sharing recently on what lies ahead in 2026. And finally, we're going to have a Q&A that will last for close to an hour, and that'll be the time for you as the audience to be able to share what it is that you've been experiencing. Okay, so that's it for this week in review. Thank you for watching, and aloha.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.